Hey guys, Stealth here. After the first video from the Notable Units series about the US was very well received by you guys, I decided to do another one. So today we're covering Great Britain. Now, Great Britain or the United Kingdom, in my opinion doesn't have that many interesting units actually. But let's have a look at what we can find here in the logistics section. This unit caught my eye in logistics because it is as fast or even faster than some of the jeeps that you can use as command vehicles. This thing travels at 100 kilometers per hour off-road, 150 on-road because it's a wheeled vehicle. But you don't see that many wheeled vehicles which are very quick and also have some armor. If you compare this to their other command unit, their other jeep, their Rover CP, still good off-road speed but zero armor. So for 10 points extra you get a bit more armor, and this bit more armor over here for only 10 points can really make a difference in whether your unit survives or not. Of course, it's still a very weak CV. If you really want something that's going to survive, you could go for the Warrior, which has a bit more armor, or even the Chieftain, but those are turning into very expensive tanks. So, this is a interesting unit for me because it's very quick, it's very agile, and you can use it to quickly capture command zones and go to terrain like forests which are somewhat off the road, where normal CVs which only travel for example 50 kph off-road don't get to very quickly. Now how do you counter this thing? Well, it's still a very poorly armored vehicle, only armed with a machine gun. So you can use pretty much anything you like, whether it's an RPG, whether it's infantry, airborne units, mortars, whatever. Anything will die or anything will kill this unit. Other than that, there are not too many interesting units in the logistics tab for me. I mean, it's all pretty run-of-the-mill, pretty standard stuff. Let's go to infantry. I wanted to highlight the Warrior Milan. Well, actually both the Warrior Milan and the Warrior 90, because they are pretty much the same vehicle. The Milan just gets that Milan F2 Launcher. I wanted to highlight this unit because for a 25 point IFV, it's very heavily armored, and this is something that the British seem to do very well. They build their vehicles with a ton of armor, front, side, back, and this way they have a pretty good survivability. Something that some of the British units, and especially those Warriors, do struggle with is that their Radar Autocannon is not a weapon that can be used on the move. It does not have a stabilisor, and that way it has the stat tag or stationary. This thing has to be sitting still in order to fire that Radar, and that really takes away from the availability or the usefulness of this unit. It would be so nice to have this thing firing on the move. I don't know, give it 20-25% accuracy on a stabilizer. That way it would be really effective at supporting tanks. And that is something that the British seem to be lacking. So keep in mind, they are very nice units. Decent accuracy, decent Milan on them. But do not use them on the move. To counter these things, use anything that has an AP value higher than 6, which is pretty much any tank in the game. But make sure that you stay outside that range of 2450. Or make sure that this thing has already fired all of his atgms. If you would do a one-on-one with this thing, let's say you have a Type 59 versus the Warrior Milan, make sure that you pop in and out of forests. Make sure that you drive out of the forest, have this thing fire the atgm, reverse back into the forest, and that way lose or have the Milan lose sight of you. Then you pop it out, you do it 3 more times. You lose, or the Milan loses all of its missiles, and then it only has that Radar autocannon left. You easily then wipe it out with your main gun on the tank, whether it's a Type 59 like I mentioned or any other tank. Another option is to go after this thing with helicopters, but keep in mind that the Radar has a range against helicopters. So you will need to be a bit careful and engage it with an atgm preferably. Although firing an atgm at a 25 point vehicle is not the best. Infantry can be used against this thing. If you can keep this thing moving, if you can drive it before you, then it cannot fire any of the weapon systems. It cannot fire the Milan or the Radar. So long as this thing is retreating, it is not going to be firing at you. So if you can scare another player into actually retreating this unit, and he is unaware that this thing has only stationary weapons, you will not be shot at all. Of course, mortars and bombers will also do the trick. Another unit in the infantry section that's interesting is of course the SAS. SAS has been in the game forever. They have also been in Airland Battle, where I have also excessively used these guys. Interesting part about the SAS is that they have both a law, so an anti-tank weapon, and a stinger, an anti-air weapon. This does mean that they are not as effective at fighting in towns versus other infantry, because they only carry that M16. But it does make them excellent skirmishers, excellent units which operate behind enemy lines. Then take out, for example, a CV if you can find it. These guys are stealthy, by the way, so you can sneak them around. Take out an SCV, take out some anti-air, take out a mortar or an artillery battery if you can find it. They have 6 of these. Accuracy of 45%, so you can use them about 3 times before they run out of ammo, depending a little bit on how much accuracy bonuses you get from these veterancies. And the stingers are also very handy to take down helicopters, mostly. As you can see, the range against airplanes is not that good. But if you have a couple of these guys, I would suggest groups of 2 or 3. In close proximity to the enemy spawn point, where they bring in their planes, then this is going to be very, very deadly to any overflying planes. Like I said, keep in mind that these guys for anti-infantry warfare only have that M16. Now this thing might have a good accuracy and even a decent stabilizer, but it will not last long against a solid machine gun. If you encounter, for example, let's say you were doing a blue on blue, so you're doing an encounter with Panzer Grenadiers, run, because the SAS only have their M16, the Panzer Grenadiers have their assault rifle and their machine gun, and that means that 9 times out of 10, unless you're engaging small 2 or 5 man groups which are fire support squads, do not engage any infantry with the SAS. You have a bit of options for these guys. You got the Lynx AH-1, the AH-7 and the Puma. All of these guys are pretty fast, pretty decent helicopters, and which helicopter you pick, I think, yeah, it has a bit of an impact on what kind of availability you have. If you pick the Lynx and the AH-7, you're going to have a little bit less availability versus the Puma or the Lynx. To counter the SAS, use infantry, but use them in larger groups. Use an IFV, use a tank, pretty much anything that these guys cannot run from and that they cannot effectively take down. Helicopters and planes are less of an option because of the stinger. If you have a helicopter that fires rocket pods over a range greater than this, you're good. Or if the stinger is out of ammo, you're good to go with a helicopter. Otherwise, be very, very careful. Now normally if you're playing Red 4, you can encounter SAS in an initial push, because some players, and I have also done this, will use the SAS to quickly capture an early town, or a town early in the game, and then wait for their main force to arrive. So wait, for example, for a group of paratroopers to come up, wait for some marines to follow, or just have the Gurkhas or the Fusiliers come up. So you can encounter these guys early on. If you do, be very, very careful, because if you're landing troops by helicopter as well, these guys can wreak a lot of havoc before those troops of yours safely touch down. So if you notice that there is a Lynx AH-1, an AH-7 or a Puma flying to the destination, keep in mind that it might just be SAS. And if you can, just quickly use a mortar if you already have those in your deck and in your game, and mortar the crap out of these guys. Other than the SAS, I don't think there are a lot of interesting units in this section for the British. Yes, you have the Royal Marines. They are nice units of infantry. They're very, very good at 1v1 infantry fights because they have that CQC tag. Now again, the CQC tag means that if you're fighting within the same block, this weapon will also fire. But if you're fighting from block to block, this doesn't even help you. So I usually take the CQC tag not too seriously, but because I don't find it happening too often. Other units, you got the atgms, you got the Javelins. Whatever you do, please do not use the blowpipe. This is a notable unit, you could say, because it is that bad. This thing carries 6 missiles, 20% accuracy, so if this thing hits once, you're pretty lucky. You do get a large availability, but please just skip over this unit, they are not worth it. So, moving on to the support section, and this is where we find the AS-90. This artillery piece is an interesting one because it fires its round in bursts. So whereas normal artillery units would fire with a rate of fire of 4 rounds a minute, that would mean they would fire, wait 15 seconds, fire another round, wait 15, etc. This thing fires, I'm not sure, 2, 3 or 4 rounds in one salvo. So you're going to have 2, 3 or 4 rounds landing on the target pretty soon, pretty quick after each other. It's like a sort of mini autoloader for this artillery piece. Once it's fired those rounds, it does need to recover for a while. It's going to be sitting reloading for a bit. So keep in mind that it might be more flexible on some fronts, but also less flexible reload wise. It does have a direct fire main gun. Again, main guns on artillery pieces are usually pretty bad in accuracy. They do have some AP power, but I would not recommend using these. They are a prototype unit, so only the British can use them, or you can use them in the Commonwealth deck. And for 130 points, they are pretty good in artillery. They are some of the best because they have a low dispersion, good range, carry quite a bit of rounds, even have some armor, and they're pretty mobile. Now to counter these things, just counter them the way you normally counter arty. So have your own artillery try and find the location, or actually you find the location and then fire your artillery at these guys. An alternative is to try and go behind the lines with some units like Special Recon. Preferably a sniper team if your deck has one, because going behind enemy lines is very, very dangerous. And the better the stealth, the better your survivability. Now, if you should encounter one of these things in the front lines, and you rarely do, you can take it out with pretty much anything. It's not good against helicopters or airplanes, it is not good against tanks, it's not good against IFVs. This thing only has 2 frontal armor, so anything that has a decent RPG, an autocannon, a law, whatever, it can shoot right through this thing. And of course they are nice to kill because they're worth 130 points. Moving up to the Marksman section, you could say that not only the Chieftain Marksman is interesting, but also, not only the Challenger, but also the Chieftain. Because for a SPOG, self-propelled anti-air gun, they are very, very heavily armored. 11 frontal armor on the Chieftain, and 15 frontal armor on the Challenger. Reason for this is because they've just taken a Challenger or Chieftain chassis and put a large twin KDA AA gun on that, a twin autocannon. Very good range against helicopters, like all SPOGs, good range against airplanes, and good accuracy, that is nice. One of the weaknesses for this unit is that because it has such a good rate of fire, 717 rounds a minute, and only carries 500 rounds, you will need to rearm this thing at some point. Because I have actually not had a game where this thing did not run out of ammo. Because they are very heavily armored though, you can keep them very, very close to your front line, or even at your front line, because 15 frontal armor is more than some of the heavy tanks have. So this thing will push right up with your main forces. I would recommend taking 5 of them at trained, because they are well enough armored to survive long enough to get up that veterancy ladder themselves. But anything that comes into contact with it, like an ATGM, will do a lot of damage to this thing. The ATGM, if you want to counter this thing, needs to be higher than 15 points. So somewhere in the ranges of 20 to 25 is good. Tanks will also do quite a bit of damage against these things. And anything that can stay outside the ground range of 1050 meters will do damage to this thing. Again, consider this thing pretty much a tank, because it has a lot of frontal armor. It's just a tank that fires upwards into the air. The moment you can flank that tank and come at it from the sides or back, that is when you have some really easy shots, because like all tanks, front is most heavily armored part of the tank, sides are somewhat less so, and the rear is just really exposed. So if you can engage this thing from the sides or rear, you have an easy kill. Chieftain Marksman is pretty similar. It just has stats which are a little worse. As you can see, their off-road speed is a little worse, their armor is a little worse. They carry the same amount of rounds, same accuracy, because it's exactly the same gun system. But again, less armor, less side armor, and you can easily take this thing down. Moving on to the Stormer HVM. This thing is interesting. It's definitely a notable unit because they can do everything, and that makes them hard to counter. They can fire at 2800 meters on the ground, 2975 meters into the helicopters, and 2275 meters at airplanes. This makes them particularly nasty because they are pretty much an AA gun mixed with an atgm carrier or vice versa, depending on how you want to look at this thing. Now, in about all countries, you don't find an atgm carrier in the support role, in the support tab, but in this situation you can use this thing as one of those atgms. Just keep in mind that it is not as effective as a dedicated atgm because it only has 12 AP power. However, 12 AP power is more than enough to do a ton of damage, also because it has 5 HE power against helicopters and airplanes. Mostly, this thing is a very good anti-helicopter unit. So if you're using a general British deck and you know that you're coming up against an airborne deck, make sure you have a couple of these guys in your own deck to counter helicopters very quickly and at a safe range. Because this is some of the longest range you can have against helicopters. And if you're facing off against, for example, a Ka-52, stuff like long-range AT weapons on helicopters, and especially the Russian helicopters have some of that, make sure that you have as best range as possible. Also, the fact that these things have 16 of these Starstreak missiles will really mean that you don't have to rearm this guy as often as you might think. Now, this Starstreak system is mounted on the Stormer transport, so hence the name Stormer HVM. That does mean that it does not have a lot of armor, and if you have a couple of infantry units, they might actually penetrate that armor if they can get close enough. I'm not too sure if this thing can engage ground units like infantry. I think it can. So if you have some of these things firing at your forces, make sure that you mortar them first. Fire at them with mortars, fire at them with artillery. Whatever you do, do not send a helicopter, because you're going to be returning it in scraps. An airplane could be useful, so long as it's not a direct bomber. An ATGM plane would work, and that would be the best option that you have. Also, tanks could do fairly well, but you do need to get the jump on this thing, because it fires these Starstreaks pretty quick, and getting hit by 12 AP power is not a pleasant happening, so make sure that you don't expose a tank to this Stormer HVM too much. Other than these three units, I could not really find a notable unit in this deck. You could say that the MLRS is a notable unit. For me, not really. It just fires 11 HE power, 227mm rockets. Not that interesting, so I don't think this is a notable unit. Moving on to tanks. Again, I could not really find any units in this tab other than the Challenger 2, which really stood out for me. Something about the British tanks in general is that they usually have a lot of armor. Even at 40 points they have 11 frontal armor. Also, British tanks don't seem to have a lot of speed. 40 kph off-road, Challenger Mark 1 55, and it slowly goes up to 60, but you're not going to get much faster than 60. So British tanks are most used in more or less defensive roles or to support other forces. You don't really often see a British push in this game which is led entirely by tanks, because they're not fast enough to retreat or react to major threats. But let's have a look at the Challenger 2. This is the super heavy for the British. 2275 meter range, like any unit, so not exactly notable there. But it has great accuracy and a great AP power. So this thing will really hurt you at extreme range with very high accuracy. Also 23 frontal armor is one of the highest in the game. And combine that with a reasonably mobile platform, 60 kph off-road and medium optics, and you have a good all-round machine. They are expensive, however, 170 points, but if you manage these things well, they can do multiple times this amount of damage. So how do you counter these things? Well, use an atgm plane, an atgm sniper if you have one of them. And by an atgm sniper I mean a plane that specifically carries one high power atgm, a high AP power. That way you can stay outside the range of the AA for the British who are using this deck, hopefully. And that way do a lot of damage to the Challenger. You could try to artillery this unit. That would work to some extent because you're going to stun the unit, and stunning it makes it less effective. But keep in mind that these things level up to from trained to hardened veteran and elite pretty quick because they can do so much damage. And that means that if those things are at elite, they are not going to be panicked or stunned for very, very long. So you will need to exploit the very short amount of time that they're going to be stunned and take them out right away. Infantry could be used against this tank, but make sure that they are coming up through cover or that they are in cover. I'm talking in this case about particular infantry or specific infantry like general infantry or shock troops, which are coming in through a forest to the side or even the front of this tank. If you have two groups of infantry, have one of them engage it from the front and the other one try to come in from the side, where this thing only has 11 side armor. And you could say that only is not really the right word to use, because 11 front or 11 side armor is as much as the Chieftain Mark II has on the front. So as you can see, very, very heavily armored. Another way you could take this thing down is to just use an atgm carrier at long range. Try to have multiple units firing at this thing so it doesn't know what front or what part of the armor to keep towards the atgm. If you were to have the tank come in like this and you have an atgm there and one over there, they both fire. The tank doesn't really know what armor to put to the front, so let's say it points its armor that way. You can then plant an atgm shot squarely into the side of this armor and do a lot of damage. So use that to quickly dispose of the Challenger 2. Now other units, not really notable. The Challenger Mark 1 or the Challenger 1 Mark 3 is just a solid tank. The Chieftain tanks are better, I found, at ambushing the enemy or putting up defensive positions, because they don't have that good of a stabilizer. 40% for the best one versus 65 for the Challengers. So if you want to have something that fires on the move, go with the Challenger line. And finally you have the Scorpion light tank. Yeah, these are just spammable units basically, or units that you spread out over your flanks to make sure that you don't have any infantry groups slowly covering your flanks or slowly going through your flanks. In the Recon tab, again, not really any units that stand out. Like all nations, they have a pretty varied Recon deck. I think that the British has more units than most. That is, if you're not considering big nations like the US or Russia. But all of these things, here you got some IFVs with guns, with armor with good optics. The Fox is interesting because it's a very fast off-road transport, or very fast off-road recon, so you can use this to quickly scout the line and get back. It does not have any armor, one on each side, so it makes it very, very easy to take down. But that's why there are only 30 points and you get 14 or 10 of them. But the only unit I really found notable here is the Special Boat Service, or SBS, because they have the L34A1, which is a submachine gun. Now you might think that a submachine gun is nothing interesting. You're right, but this one is silenced. And that means that if you disable these weapons and you come up against a infantry, let's say an infantry, command infantry in a forest, you spot them and you engage them with submachine gun with limited risk of detection. Otherwise, the silent SMG or the silenced SMG is not that special. It's just a unit that is very good at operating behind enemy lines because it has very good stealth. It carries 10 laws, so it can do quite a bit of damage to armored vehicles. And you can use them in towns if you want to, because they have the Bren L4 with the CQC tag and their submachine gun, which has a very high rate of fire. I suppose that you could say that this... how to counter these. Use a mortar, use another Recon unit. If you combine, for example, a Spetsnaz group with Resvetskas, or if you have a sniper team which is hunting these guys, you're going to have a really easy time. The problem 9 times out of 10 with these guys is actually finding them. If you have spotted them and you have a general direction, dropping napalm on top of them is usually a safe option, because that way you're not exposing any of your own units and you bomb a larger area. Just keep in mind that the SBS, like most elite forces, run at 30 kph, so they can relocate faster than you might expect. Moving on to the vehicles tab. Again, for me, not really any units that stand out other than the Centurion Av Rso. This is the Centurion Av Rso, so Armored Vehicle Royal Engineers, which means that it has one of those very short stub M135 barrels, the same as the one on the American CEV. You use this one to pound infantry and lighter vehicles, exactly the same as you would with CEV. 8 HE power means it's very good at stunning and damaging some lesser armed units. You can even stun heavily armed tanks, but you will heavily armored tanks, but you will never do a lot of damage to tanks because it does not have an AP power. Also, it has decent frontal armor, and if you're clearing a town, since the British lack any form of napalm in this tab, I would recommend bringing a Centurion Av Rso just to make sure you can pound a lot of infantry, whether it's in the open or whether it's in a city block where you can use this gun to quickly stun them and come in with, for example, a couple of Royal Marines to wipe out the block. One thing to note though is that they are very slow. They are 35 kph units off-road, big size, so they are a pretty nice target for an ATGM. Just make sure that the ATGM doesn't have to get too close, because these guns are better than most tank guns, or better than all main tank guns, I should say, because they have 2450 meter range, and for some ATGMs that's the same as their range. So if you want to safely kill this thing, use a long range ATGM carrier, like one that has 2625, or if you want to be really safe, you could use the Russian Storm, which goes up to 2800. I believe there are also some Chinese ATGM carriers which go up to 2800 meter range. But otherwise, you can engage this thing with helicopters, because it's very weak to helicopters. It only has this M1919 machine gun, and it's not going to do a lot of damage unless that helicopter is flying right over your head. So tackle this thing using an AT plane, ATGM carriers, or helicopters. Moving on to the helicopter tab. You got just your Lynx AH-1 TOW and AH-7 TOW 2. Not a lot of interesting things to note about these, so they're not really notable units. They are just units carrying a couple of AT weapons like the TOW 2. What is interesting is the Lynx 3. It's an upgraded version, and this one gets Hellfires. Now if you're faced with dealing with some heavy tanks, and by heavy I mean in the ranges of 150 points, bring out one Lynx 3 or 2 if you want to be safe, and all of your tanks will melt away. Because Hellfires have an accuracy of 70% with 26 AP power. And that means that this thing will quickly dispose of any tanks, no matter how well armored they are. One thing to keep in mind though about the Hellfire is that they are semi-active, so you need to be looking at the target. If that tank manages to get away, if the enemy puts up a smoke screen, you're going to lose sight of the target and you're going to lose your Hellfire. Lynx 3s also come equipped with stingers, and that means that they are the only flying AA unit that the helicopter tab has, other than the Lynx AH-7 20mm, but that's a different story. This thing at least has decent range against helicopters, so if you want to push onto a town early in the game, if you want to capture that town early, you bring in a couple of you bring in a couple of SAS in a helicopter, preferably a Lynx too, because they're just as fast. The Puma is lagging a little bit behind. You escort it with one Lynx 3 or 2 if you want to have more stingers, and then you can quickly take down the helicopters from the opposing party. You can even take down some of their transports, although I would not recommend doing that with the Hellfire because they are expensive to resupply. And firing a Hellfire at a 15 or 20 point vehicle is a waste of time in most cases. You could argue that the early stages of the game are different, because that is when you really have to make the difference in capturing a town or not. And if you weaken the enemy early on and or not allow them to capture that town, then you can have a decent position for later on in the game. To counter the Lynx, use manpads, use infantry that carries AA weapons. Use something that has a longer range than 2800mm, and there are some units that have that, although not that many. But if you use manpads, you're going to be really safe against this guy, because you cannot do anything to counter that. They are small, so that means that they will dodge some shots, medium optics, so if you only use manpads they will generally not see them, or at least not in time. You could, of course, use some of these slower planes which have fire and forget short-range missiles, and you use those to take down the Lynx. If you're using AA, the standard AA like a SPOG or a missile AA, make sure that it has more range than 2800 meters. Some SPOGs have a max range of 2800 meters, and keep in mind that those will get wiped out by this Hellfire if it spots you. So be very careful and be safe, just use manpads. Next up, the air tab. Again, most of these units are just pretty run-of-the-mill. The only notable thing is that pretty much all the Harriers are armed with AA missiles. Pretty much all of them carry some of these AIM-9 versions, whether it's the L variant, some of them carry the M variant, let's say, where was it? Must have it confused with another net. Yeah, here it is, on the Eurofighter Typhoon. So not on a Harrier, but on the Eurofighter. And this is actually a notable unit because it does everything very well. It carries 4 long-range MRAM missiles, 7,000 meter range, 60% accuracy, and they're fire and forget, which is very nice. They are, however, very expensive. They're a prototype unit and you only get one of them. If you lose this unit, you lose the card pretty much, and you don't have any air superiority fighters. Now, while I do like the Eurofighter, I will not often use it because of that flaw, because you only get one of them. Before, a couple patches ago, you could bring in 2 of these, and I think Rookie may be trained for 1 card, and that is when the Eurofighter was really being used and even abused. But nowadays I generally don't take this unit with me. But let's see what it can do. It has no armor, but if you dodge any fire using 50% ECM, you won't even need any armor. 300 meter turn radius is one of the lowest for fighters in the game, and that means that it can fire these short range missiles at AIM-9Ms at short range if you're doing dog fighting with another fighter. Exceptional air detection means that you can be detecting the enemy long before he detects you, hopefully. And 1000 kph speed will mean that you can quickly get to the front line or get to that fighter or bomber which you want to intercept. Just keep in mind you only get one of them. To counter one of these, use long range AA. Use something that can really touch this unit before it manages to escape. And using a double line of AA with SPOGs up front to stun the unit and then AA missile launchers to really destroy it, you're going to have a pretty solid defense against these guys. Firing, for example, one group of man-pads at them is not going to be too effective because of that 50% ECM. This thing will dodge quite a bit of shots. So if you keep that in mind, these units are not that difficult to deal with. Another notable unit, and the last notable unit for this deck, is the Harrier Gr7. This one used to be armed with an atgm, and they changed that to carry 4 GBU-12 paveway 2s. These are fire and forget bombs. Of course, you don't get any guided bombs. But they are 0 dispersion bombs. That means that 4 of these bombs drop exactly at the same target. And with a 10 HE power, that means that they can do a lot of damage. Now, you use the Harrier Gr7 to quickly bomb towns. But to bomb one very, very specific block in that town, this thing will not carpet bomb. And keep in mind that the GBU payway, that the GBU-12 is a bomb that attacks from the top. That means that if you fire 4 of these bombs at the top of a super heavy, like let's say a T-72, or sorry, a T-80U for example, 4 HE bombs, which do 10 HE power each, is going to really upset that tank if it doesn't destroy him outright. And this means that you can effectively take down super heavies with a 100-point vehicle or a 100-point unit, and that's nice. It also has good ECM, 40%. That's on the very, very high end for a bomber, because that's basically what this is. Officially it's classed as a multi-role. I don't really agree, because you don't use this thing as an air superiority fighter. The only thing you could argue is that it is effective against helicopters as well. I'd agree with you there, but using this thing against helicopters, especially if those helicopters bring their own AA escort, is something I would not recommend. To counter the Harrier, pretty much use the same thing as I told you earlier. Use a row of SPOGs and then a row of AA missile launchers behind them. Or use multiple air superiority fighters, because 40% ECM will mean that these things can dodge quite a bit of fire. They're quite maneuverable, turn radius of 350, but they're not that fast. So if you have some fast units like the Su-27s, they can really intercept this guy in time, using their 900 kph speed, or even 1000 if you use, for example, an interceptor or some of the more superior fighters, and you take down the Harrier Gr7. So that concludes this version of notable units. I don't think there are many other interesting units in this tab, so these are all the notable units that the British have. I hope you liked the video. If you think I forgot any units, and if you have any units that you'd like to add, just let me know and I will add them in the description if I agree with you. If you like this video, please hit that like button below. It will really help me out because it gets me a bit more views, and the more views we get, the more people we can help with Wargame. If you want more of these videos, I will continue to do them over the coming weeks, so subscribe to my channel just to keep up and to catch up. Again, thanks for watching, and see you next video.